All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Rehearsal Trifecta webinar. I'm your host and coach, Cindy Skalicki. I just want to ask all of you in the windows over here in my stamp, we're going to do some exercises in between some small little chatting. And so I always like to start with the one word exercise. So get your chat box open and tell me one word of how you're feeling right now in today's call. Excited, hungry, tired, stressed, overwhelmed, joyful. Just drop it in the chat and we can kind of have a sense of the pulse of our group today. Excited, awesome. Wow, 3 excited and energized. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. I think it's a good idea to just get a pulse with the people you're with when we can't go around round robin to everybody. Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm going to walk you through we did the one word exercise. We're going to go through this today and in about 45 minutes. So buckle your seatbelts. We're going to do an intro so you can learn a little more about me because I have a couple of new folks here on the call. And I'm going to tell you the origin story of this trifecta that we're going to talk about. We will then go through the trifecta itself. I will give you some bonuses on what not to do. And also to summarize, give you a chance to ask me some questions. And there is a special offer, of course, at the end in case you like what you see here today and want a little bit more. So a little about me, for those of you who don't know me, how did I come to be here at On Point Communications? Why do I have the right to stand up here and talk to you about the rehearsal trifecta to begin with? Well, I'll just run you through a few of my stepping stones. First, I have some experience when I was in my earlier career at a global ad and global.
Oop.
Freezing. Something's freezing.
Yep. You guys are clear.
Cindy's freezing.
Entity experiences to strategic developments and just all our firms. So that's one program that I
offer. You were freezing.
Sorry, go
Cindy,
ahead.
For about 36.
Oh, am I back?
Now we missed
okay.
The last 2 minutes.
You missed it. Okay. Well, a global ad agency, global PR firm got really tight and good at that scientific messaging piece with the PR firm because they only serviced healthcare clients. So that was an interesting learning for me. And it's developed into a scientific messaging workshop that I give now and just gave last week. My degrees are in something called rhetoric, which is the science of person. And so what that means is that I am a message detective. I love to go into messages and the deliverer of the messages to determine its effectiveness. Is it landing with the audience? And if it is, why is it doing that? If it's not, which is often the case with my clients, what can we pull out of my little bag of tricks to help you to advance that level of persuasiveness so your audience is going to do what you ask them to do by the end. I'm also the creator of the Forbes.com featured how-to model, which is part of a larger course that I teach, but that is a beautiful model that I developed after years of watching pitches and presentations and noticing there were some missing pieces with regard to story. I'm also, in terms of industry, really involved with clients in the science and tech, AI, some CPG, service-based industries, really everything and anything that has a message. And I really love that part of my work because I get to learn so much about areas I may not be expert in, but I can help those folks bring that messaging down to the right level for their audience. I've done a lot of in entrepreneurship and fundraising. I offer group webinars, seminars, ongoing consulting, some one-to-one work. I have also provided keynote speeches and I do some script writing for people as well. And we're going to talk about that in this lesson here because it's related to this rehearsal trifecta. Here's just a smattering of me with some of my clients. Upper left is the class I taught at UGA when I was in my graduate school years in Georgia. This center photo is Jen Henderson. This was in her early days. In fact, Bill on the call was at that at that pitch event with me. That's a measly $7,000 that she is proud of at that moment. And she just landed $7 million about 2 weeks ago, and is one of the first clients I had to go through my how-to model. In the upper right, some companies this year who won the Colorado Companies to Watch Award, and then a smattering below of some clients that I've enjoyed working with so far. Okay, so what I would like you to drop in the chat right now is the answer to this question, if this resonates with you. What is one reason why you don't rehearse your message as much as you probably ought to? Tell me a feeling word when it comes to rehearsing that kind of creeps up. When you're supposed to rehearse your message a little more, what stops you? Drop something in the chat, drop a feeling word. I get nervous. It's, I don't know when I'm going to do it. I don't know how. Talk to me about what's happening. Some stage fright. Okay. Put other priorities ahead. Nervousness. Absolutely. Word that I won't be able to adapt if I'm too scripted. Great, Dane. We're going to talk about that. And freezing. Steve, do you want to talk about putting other priorities ahead? What's the conversation in your head at that moment?
At that moment, well, the rehearsal piece seems kind of mechanical or let's say boring or not exciting. And if I have some other things that I need to advance, that gets me more energized about a conversation either with a prospect or an existing client, that sort of audience.
So it's about what excites you on your priority list, and rehearsing is not one of them. Is that a good summary? Okay. Awesome. Well, I want to tell you the origin story, and I'm going to touch on that, Steve, kind of your feelings there, because they're so common. I want to tell you the story of how this whole rehearsal trifecta came to be. So this is me speaking at a keynote event in, I think it was around 2017, early on in the life of On Point Communications, which is 6 years old. And I was asked to do a keynote for a conference that was coming to town here in Northern Colorado. And I had 5 days or 6 days to create this keynote message. It was a little bit last minute. I wasn't super happy about that time frame, and I was feeling really stuck. Here was my time frame. I had to give a talk in about 25 to 30 minutes in length. I did not want to use slides and make it teachy and presenty. And I was not going to use any note cards or a script. I mean, hello, I'm a public speaking professional. I needed to get up there and demonstrate and nail this message. Well, at this time, I had 4 kids aged, ranging in age from around, 8 to 12 or 14. And I was a very busy mom driving around. I was thinking to myself, when am I ever going to have enough time to rehearse a message that's 30 minutes in length so that I can know it that well? Because to rehearse a message that's 30 minutes in length, even twice a day, is an hour of just the talking, never mind the mind preparedness that you need. And the energy is a big part of that as well. If any of you have ever really wanted to nail a presentation and you've rehearsed it and it's long, takes the wind out of you, and a lot of brain power and energy is consumed. And so I was really stuck on how I was going to do this, and I had to figure something out. And so I did. And here's kind of what I ended up doing. You can see this picture on the lower right. So I did basically 3 things, and I'm just going to tap this at this point and then dive a little deeper into them later. But this is a screenshot of my script. And what I ended up doing was I wrote everything out that I wanted to say for my message. I decided on the stories. I really took time to edit it so that the sentence structure was where I wanted it. And then I color coded 4 sections of the talk. I did the intro as green, the first story is orange, the second is blue, and my close was yellow. And then what we're going to get into in part of the trifecta is I I ended up using this color-coded Word document to help me record myself so that I could learn this material with precision. And I ended up, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. But what that process did for me was create this huge efficiency in my ability to rehearse my message. And there are a few things that happened when I did this. Number one, I was rehearsing a message that was near perfect because I had taken so much time to write my script out and chisel it perfectly. Number two, the color-coded nature of this really works well for your brain, because when you start seeing green, you know what that message is and what that storyline is going to be. And number three, we'll get to the power of the listening to yourself through a recorded device. But so this is just to share that, you know, when you have a big hill to climb with how to memorize or really learn and embody your message, there are shortcuts you can take. And this is one that I created that I now teach with great success to so many clients who have the same problem: a short time frame, not a lot of time on their hands, and really a great desire to nail it so that they are in front of the audience embodying that message instead of seeing the wheels kind of turning. And it was a great success. Ended up really working the room that day, feeling in control and getting to that I nailed it feeling. So before you can rehearse, let's just take a breath here and look at what you need to have done with your message before it's time to rehearse, okay? So think about a message you have right now that you're about to deliver or need to prepare, and ask yourself these questions. How long is your talk? Are we talking a 5-minute investor pitch or 45-minute conference talk? How is your content organized? Are you happy with it? Do you feel that it's strong, or do you need help there, or do you need to work on that? Do you need outside perspective with a colleague or a coach? What's happening there? Number three, have you stepped into your audience's shoes? So much needs to happen before you rehearse as you're building the message so that you can pretend to be your audience and say, you know, if I'm going to be my audience, what would I want to hear from me? And then you kind of back out your message. And the reverse of that, and what we don't want to do, is be too in our own heads about what I want to tell my audience all the time. What do I want to deliver? We know that we have things we need to say, but how we say it and in what order we say it and with what stories we say that can make a big difference in nailing it versus failing it. So number four, what stories will you tell? Have you picked them out? 5, how's your slide deck? Visually, is it beautiful? Do you love it? It's really important that you do. Did you add photos, an agenda, if it's a meeting slide or some kind of work-oriented deck? What about pictures of people? Those engage your audience a lot more than just plain slides. Have you written your script? Have you edited your script at least once, probably 2, 3, 4 times before you have really got it right? Have you timed it, and have you proofread it if you're doing a slide deck, right? So these all need to be in place before it's time to rehearse. I say, generally speaking, your pitch, presentation, whatever, needs to be around 85 to 90% there before it's time to start rehearsing. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is just tell me, you don't have to type it in, you can just unmute. Tell me something, and you can just kind of raise your hand. What do you see in a speaker when they haven't rehearsed enough? What can you see or detect in their delivery when they're not nailing it or not polished? Who's got something? Guillermo, go ahead.
Well, I see a lot of hesitation and
Okay.
a lot of trying to fill in with those filling for some reason.
Yep. Filler words. Absolutely. Those are great signs. Exactly. Dane, what do you have?
Going too fast.
Tells you they didn't prepare or just memorized, perhaps, right?
Yeah, okay. Usually if they've just memorized it and they're like, oh, I've got to hit all these points, and they just speed right through it.
Yep, that's a great example of not getting into your audience's shoes and getting into the telling them moment, right? Steve, what do you have? You're on mute.
They seem to be kind of rambling and almost speaking impulsively as opposed to having a roadmap.
Okay. Yep. Too off the cuff, too much impromptu, not focused enough. Excellent. Any others? Juan, what do you have?
Repeating the same words, the same message. I think as Guillermo, which is my mentor, he told me the other day, once that you said one thing is enough. Your message is clear, so don't repeat things.
Great. That's a great answer. I'm actually working with a client right now on this very thing. How can I make 2 sentences just one and leave it there? And that's a great, great point. Thank you. Bill, you don't have to join in. I know you have all the answers, unless you
don't have the answers, but another one I just thought of is sometimes when I notice someone is not prepared, they tend to be more focused on not embarrassing themselves, and they're not picking up on the nonverbal cues from the audience. You know, they don't, they're too focused on not embarrassing themselves, you know?
Great point. If you aren't clued into your audience, then you can't tell when they're starting to get bored. And actually, I wrote an article about a month ago on this naming strategy that I interviewed someone and we talked about the naming strategy, which means when your audience is bored, Bill, you can kind of call on someone and say, hey, how's this landing with you? Do you have any questions? Just to wake people up if they are feeling off in their own lands. But that's not possible to do unless you really know your message. And so that's a really important piece. Okay, so today we're going to do what is basically a very a good glimpse at module 4 of the course that I developed called Perfecting Your Pitch. This is the string of modules that the course includes. It's a mastery program that I developed toward mastering your message. And then this is actually the slide from the module, Nailing the Delivery. By the time we get to this, we've already clicked all of these pieces. So let's learn the rehearsal trifecta. Practice makes perfect. Okay, there's 3 things that are made up of this rehearsal trifecta. Obviously, tri meaning 3, right? And they are practicing, rehearsing, and visualizing. And we're going to go through each one of those and talk through why they're each important and when to do them. And if you can go through this trifecta, by the time you have really executed each part, you will have achieved message mastery. So the first step, when you're at that 85 to 90% of completion with your message, and it's time to practice, it's time to stop, noodling the deck to death, because that is a very bad idea. You need to put a big, get your big permanent marker out, put it on your calendar, proverbially speaking, and say, I am not going to noodle this deck after 8 p.m. the night before my talk, because it's such a crutch and it's so enticing to do that instead of rehearsing. So practicing means that you have got your slide deck or your script up and you're doing this by yourself. So for me, I think back to when I was in elementary school and high school, and it was time for me to memorize a poem, right? I would go to my bathroom and I would look in the mirror and I would have my sheet of paper there and I would read it and read it and read it. And then I would try to say it by myself without the notes. So you're actually just standing there with yourself and you're saying the words. Okay. You have to get the words out of your mouth. You have to get the feel for the sentences, the sentence structure, and the storylines. It also really helps you see how nervous you might be. And if you're feeling more and more nervous, know that with more practice and with more mastery of that message and the content, that nervousness is going to go down. You can also imagine your audience out there in front of you, smiling at you. Okay, they're not throwing tomatoes and daggers at us. Let's imagine them being interested. And that goes toward kind of our visualization. But if you're going to practice your message first, I would say do this 2 or 3 times all the way through. Depends on how long your message is, of course, but get up and deliver it using your notes. It's okay at first to do that. And slowly you want to come away from those. And we'll talk about how to do that. Rehearsing is the second piece, and this is the biggest part of the trifecta. When you are rehearsing in front of other people. And there is something that happens inside of us when we put human beings in front of us to rehearse. We at least I, and from what I've heard clients tell me, your heart rate, it starts pumping much faster. You might get dry mouth. You might get wiggly. You might have sweaty palms. You might not be able to take a very deep breath. And you get this kind of shallow breathing from the sternum up, and you can't access your diaphragm, which is your friend when it comes to speaking and producing that big, round, full sound. You have to engage that muscle, that diaphragm, and do diaphragmatic breathing. Okay. So rehearsing is really important not to skip. And the reason is you are now at a place where you're kind of performing and you're closer to the real environment that you're going to pitch or present in. It can just be one other person, to be honest, as long as there's someone else there making you stand up a little straighter and helping you evaluate. I want to try to just completely tear to shreds this concept that rehearsing has to be painful. And here's how you can make it not painful. It looks like we have a couple of teammates here in the audience. And what I would say is, if someone wants to rehearse with the other person, invite them into the office or the Zoom room. I'm going to run this presentation. Okay, Juan, I want you to take a look at my filler words. If you could count them for me while I give this 10-minute talk, I would appreciate a tally. Hey, Sue, would you mind timing this for me so I can see where I land? And John, I worked really hard on slide 6. It's the one with the timeline. And I'm trying to keep that really tight so it flows. Can you let me know how I'm doing and where I could maybe adjust? So when you give your audience jobs to do, and you give them assignments to help you, they become your teammates. And they are not critics, and they are not out to get you. And you are now in a situation where you're building you got some bonuses here, right? You're building relationships, you're building trust, you're demonstrating what it means to work hard and want and desire this mastery, because you're probably on the same team delivering something to someone where it could really help everyone there if you do it well. And so having some accountability and you having thought through what you want them to do, you just wait till you go around the circle after you have pitched and you start asking people for what their outputs were. Your time was this. You had 26 fillers. You're actually doing awesome on that timeline slide. I totally got all of it. And then you're like, yes. So this is a really powerful tool when you have the space in your day or you plan it ahead. Highly recommend rehearsing in front of others, especially a corporate team environment or other entrepreneurs, really strong. So now I want to spend a little time here on how to rehearse without rehearsing. To do this well, we're going to kind of think back to those color-coded segments of the paper, okay? Whether you have a script like the one on the previous slide or a slide deck, either one of these works well. And this is what you can do to rehearse with yourself a little bit, okay? You're kind of your own audience in this instance. And what you want to do is you want to get your message out and you want to record yourself delivering it perfectly, like as perfectly as possible. So this is not about testing yourself to see if you know it. That's not what we're doing. We are trying to deliver the message into a recorded device as perfectly as possible. And I'm talking intonation, tone of voice, pauses, accelerated speech or momentum that you've built, repetition of the first parts of a phrase. Now is the time. Now is the time. I use that as an example, even though it's typically found in the political realm. You get the point, right? You want to really build in these things that have some stylistic power and rehearse it into the recorded device so that here's what happens, right? You have recorded it, you've flipped through all your slides. Now you have your I nailed it speech in your pocket. If you do this through Zoom, you can get it to record to the cloud. It will send you an email. You can just click that link and listen to yourself give the I nailed it version of your presentation. And what happens next is really powerful. And this is what I did because, I had to memorize this 30-minute flow of a talk. And I say memorize meaning not verbatim, but I knew by the end of rehearsing that and listening to myself nail it, 10, 15 times, I knew how to tell that story so that even if I missed a word here or there, it didn't matter. I was so confident in the material that I had heard so many times and really committed to memory that I was going to be fine no matter how it came out. I knew where it went, what the sentence structure should feel like. And so you want to take your talk with you on a drive, on a walk, and really begin to visualize yourself nailing it. I'm going to ask for questions at the end of this slide, but I want to touch on visualizing. Visualizing is incredibly powerful. This is, something that athletes do, actors, actresses, politicians, anyone out there who really wants to gain mastery. They visualize themselves winning. I'll never forget someone telling me, "Oh, you're supposed to visualize yourself nailing it? I always visualize myself doing terrible." And I thought, well, that's not at all what we're trying to do here. We want to get at the feeling that you want to feel on that stage. Okay. So how, when, and why do we visualize? How do we visualize? We do this by maybe getting a photo of the room that you're going to be in if it's at a conference or a place you have never been before. I have definitely done that, and it's so helpful to see the room I'm going to be in. Where's the podium? Where are the seats? How much light is there? What's the space in the room? Is it tiny and I'm going to be like, people watching me and just staring at me up close? Or do I have some space to walk around? Find out where you're going to be and visualize yourself in that room. Visualize what you're going to be wearing. Visualize how you're going to be standing, where your slide deck might be behind you. Visualize yourself doing an amazing job. And then also visualize your audience. Visualize your audience looking at you with interest, sitting toward the front of their chair, taking notes on what you're saying or writing down questions, maybe wrinkling their brow and nodding when you get to that timeline slide that you've now totally nailed and it's going to land with them. Visualize the whole experience. And you can start this as soon as you've been assigned a talk, but it also is, and you should, it's also really important to sort of really do this while you're listening to yourself on that recorded device and the last 24 hours prior to your talk, really just getting into that mindset so that you can be all that you can be, right? What kind of questions do we have here at the end here? Anyone have any questions, thoughts,
Very clear.
Questions? Very clear. Thank you, Juan. Dane?
Yeah, you talked about when you're at 80 to 90% complete. I think I jump into practicing and editing as I'm building the speech to begin with. So what suggestions do you have about how to structure that work leading up to this point to get to practicing so that you don't practice and then stop and edit in the middle of your practice and just keep tweaking things as you're practicing?
Great question, Dane. I would say it's normal to do a little bit of tweaking, when you do get to the practicing and rehearsing, because that's partly why we are getting it all out loud. I would say, though, as you are writing the script and before you get to the time you're going to stand and deliver, you can still read it to yourself out loud and get the flow as you're crafting it. And what I really want to plant here is that we write so very differently than we speak, or we should. And so often people write out their speech as if it's a journal article or something. You have these really big multisyllabic words, long sentences joined by and, thus, and, consequently. No, we want really simple words. We want really easy to grasp sentences. We want a lot of small sentences that are very common language, easy to understand. And so make sure, Dane, that you're making that flip in your mind as you're writing, that this is not a blog post. This is not something that you're going to write and publish. This is something you're talking to people, right there in the room that really just want to connect with you, learn, but not have to work so hard. We shouldn't ask our audiences to work so hard if we don't have to. We want this to be easy for them. We want listening to us to be fun. We want it to be a little entertaining. We want it to be relaxing and inspiring in the right ways. We don't want them to work hard at things that we can take off their plate. If we have to describe a tough process for an investor, let's spend their energy there, not figuring out where the sentence began and where it ended. Any other questions, Steve?
Yeah, I don't remember if you have this next comment coming up in your outline, but what I was curious about and what you're showing here, how does it differ if you're using a remote presentation, Cindy, or if you're on Zoom? How many of these things are the same, or do you have some different pieces that become as part of the rehearsing?
Good question. I'd say that by and large, if you're going to present in a virtual setting, frankly, you don't have to do quite the volume of rehearsals as you would if you were going to be on stage. That's because, hello, I have cheat sheets right here on my computer screen to remind me of a few things I want to say to all of you. We have so many ways to kind of do shortcuts with our presenting, but if you're going to be on a stage and you're going to really have one shot at doing this and you can't record it and play it, send it off to your clientele afterwards, you're probably going to do more in a real in-person setting. And however, that doesn't mean that your credibility is still not on the line when you're speaking virtually. And so people can tell virtually if you know your stuff or don't based on your eyes. Typically, it relates to where you're looking, how comfortable you are, how loud you might be. And so people can tell in a virtual setting, just like a real setting, whether or not you're prepared. And so having a little bit of, but the recording makes the process of recording yourself and playing it back is a really applicable thing for virtual settings because you're in that same setting that you're going to deliver it in. Does that help to answer your question, Steve?
Yes. I think there are some pieces that are a little different to be sensitive to and aware of, and some of which you used earlier with us. In terms of the chat or asking, to engage the audience and asking some questions like you did, fill in one word. And, what strikes me is it's so easy to tell if depending on how many people are in that audience, if I'm using Zoom, to tell, do they look like they're paying attention to me, or are they reading email and doing something else? And so, it kind of throws in a little different aspect.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a great point. The ability to keep people's attention virtually is way harder than in person, in my experience. And for example, Guillermo and Juan were in the session Monday when I was doing the Founders Institute session, and they may not know this, but I couldn't see anybody. I couldn't see one face. Okay, I could see Diane and Jonathan, and then I had 46 people with just a letter on the box, and I had to pretend they were people, right? And they are people, but that was one of the reasons I did so much chat engagement. And what you're hitting on here, Steve, is the difference between a performance pitch and a presentation where you can do the chatting and the engaging with the audience because you're teaching or instructing or coaching. Some of the clients I have are doing a 5-minute, 15-minute, whatever minute uninterrupted pitch. And that's where you're definitely doing more of the performing, and the playback or back and forth doesn't come until that Q&A session. So the stakes are higher in those situations to really perform seamlessly and beautifully because all eyes are on you. So, but you make a good point. There's a lot more for us to do to distract ourselves. There's tabs. I can totally fake paying attention to you by scooting over to another tab, picking up my phone, or pretending I'm taking notes. So there's challenges to both, no question. Any other questions? Hi, Mary, welcome. I'm glad to see you.
Cindy.
Yes.
I have a question regarding the rhythm of your breathing. I can see that your voice is kind of soothing and very appealing. But what is that rhythm of your breathing that you use? I mean, what can you elaborate about that? Because I see that, I mean, you are not fatigued, even though you have been talking continuously for the last half an hour. You know what I mean? What's the secret? I mean, what's that rhythm of your breathing that you use in order to maintain that soothing effect and be very effective in your speaking?
Wow. Guillermo, no one has asked me that before. So congrats on the first time question. Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is that I'm standing, and standing and delivering completely changes how you sound and how you feel about presenting the message. So I would suggest that you might stand for some presentations and see how it goes. See if you notice a difference. See if you feel better, more confident. Secondly, there's two things about this message that might be affecting how I sound and breathe. One, I know it really well, and I have delivered it hundreds of times. And two, I love it. And I think that is what you're hearing. I love teaching people about this. And I've heard people say things about a soothing quality that my voice has. And I don't do that. That's just something maybe that I have. I don't practice that. I don't know how to teach that necessarily, other than to say I was a singer. When I was younger, I learned a lot about breathing. I have heard people be too quiet, and I know the difference between kind of a mousy, quiet voice and the value of a loud, full voice, because volume is your instant number one way to build credibility right away, right out of the gate. If you come out loud enough, I mean, we're talking an 8 or so on a scale of 1 to 10, where we're talking to each other in conversation, maybe around a 5. You want to be at that 7.5 to 8.5 in a room. And even on Zoom, it makes a mark. And so I would say, if you're not prone to breathing and rhythm of that, there are breathing exercises that you can do, and just trying to be very mindful of where your breath goes in the sentence so that you don't run out, right? And that's what you can find in the practicing and in the rehearsing pieces there. It often just comes from confidence that you're feeling that your audience is going to get value, and therefore you're less nervous, I guess. I don't know if I answered that great, but
well, since Guillermo brought it to our attention, I was trying to pay attention to that, and you don't use filler words. And so it allows us to catch up with you as you're speaking, and it allows you a chance to take a breath. And so it kind of slows the pace of the whole talk down a notch. And there's someone I've been listening to regularly, and he ends every sentence with, you know. And every time he says, you know, I'm like, oh, wait, I don't know. I blanked for a while there. I have no idea what you said. And now I can't follow you to your next thought. And so I think the lack of filler helps that soothingness.
That's a great insight that I would never know. So thank you for that, Dane. I actually just heard a world-renowned speaker speak a couple of months ago, and he had a filler phrase that I hear a lot, which is, does that make sense? Anybody hear that? I can't stand that. And I fall prey to that sometimes, but I try to say instead, did that land? Does anyone have a question or something different? But that has become, there are many types of filler words, and I don't have time to go through all of that today, but there's many more than but, yeah, so. I hear a lot of basically, does that make sense? You know, there's many that people have that they make up. Some people have, like, to your point, and they'll say it 6 times in a presentation. So those are great points that you're all making. So thank you for chiming in. I'm going to keep us moving because it's 9:51. I appreciate you staying on with me. Okay, a few bonus tips for all of you. This is things not to do. When you are presenting, you feel a little nervous. Don't say that, okay? No one in the audience wants to hear that you're nervous. We think that gets us connected to the audience, and maybe they think of us as this human being who's struggling, but they don't want to hear it. Keep it to yourself. Don't narrate your tech issues. If I remember giving a talk to a jam-packed standing room only room about 3 years ago, and my tech went out. The pacing was off on my slides. People couldn't see certain things. And I just made a decision right then to say, we're not going to worry about that. I'm going to keep us going. And there was like this collective sigh in the room that I wasn't going to make them sit there for 5, 6, 7 minutes while that was going on. So if you can do that and you don't need your slides to get things going, be good enough and know your message well enough that you can do that. So it's not a crutch. Don't ignore the clock. Keep yourself committed to the time of your audience, which I begged your forgiveness at the beginning of this talk because we started a little late. And I said, if you can stay till 10, let's do that. So thanks for staying with me. Don't call out typos. Generally speaking, not a good idea. Just roll with it. People see it. We're all human. It's okay. Try not to have them, but don't call them out. Don't make excuses for fumbling your words, for anything that's coming to mind that you might want to narrate. Don't tell us those things. And don't be overly reliant on your slides. Try to engage your audience, even if it's a slide right in front of you, like I'm doing now. Try to be engaging with your nonverbals, your eye contact, your vocal intonation, and participation if that's something you can do. Bonus tip, use your computer's screen as a cheat sheet, okay? I am telling you, this is such a great trick for virtual presentations. It's important that you only do one message on a Post-it note. This is not the time to write out your script, guys, on the Post-it note and then start like reading it over here, okay? Some of these tips you can see are reminders for me. Some are things that I want to remember to say. So I would say, pick your battles, pick your Post-its, pick 6 things that really you want to remember to do or say. I've got my chat questions up here, the things I want you to drop in the chat as I was thinking through those so that I don't forget. But, you know, there are some shortcuts that you can and should take if you just want to really up your game. Okay, so what have we done? The last 45 minutes, intro, origin story of the trifecta itself, learned the trifecta, talked about what not to do. And we can just sort of summarize today by saying that rehearsing matters. The rehearsal trifecta is your ticket to nailing it. You have to do 2 things beautifully in order to nail a message. Number 1, we didn't do this today or talk about it today, but you have to have your content tight, really well thought out, well organized on a macro level, meaning slide organization, and on a micro level, meaning how the slides look. If we're talking slide decks, got to have the content really well thought out and beautiful. That is definitely a missing piece for a lot of folks that I run into. But then we have to rehearse it really beautifully. And you will know the difference in both your audience's responses to you, the questions that they ask you, mostly being forward-thinking questions or good feedback, and the way that you feel. You know, you think, wow, I really nailed that presentation. I feel so good about what I did. And that's a great feeling, but the real judges in the room are your audience, right? You might think you did awesome, but if they don't think you did awesome, you didn't do awesome. So, you have to remember that it's all for your audience. And there's just no way around that. We get ourselves confused about that. It's just a good reminder. Okay, just a few offers for you today. I actually have an extra offer here on number 3, which is my mastery program. But if you liked what you saw today, I have 3 ways that we might be able to do more. If now, if in a week, if as you approach a specific presentation, everyone on this call gets a free 15-minute call with me to work on some laser beam questions just with me, one-to-one. Ask Cindy anything. The link to my calendar is always in my signature in my emails, highlighted in yellow. Go grab your 15-minute free slot with me today, and let's just work on a question that you might have for a message. The first package here is the revolving door rehearsal package. That is for you if you want to really spit shine and share with me where you are rehearsing that message. The description of how that session runs is here on the screen. I let you have the floor for the time you need it, uninterrupted. I record it all. I record my feedback. I have transcripts of the call so you can use it again and again and go through it again after our call. Really highly valuable coaching for you when you need to deliver a message and nail it. I also have executive session packages, which is 3 one-hour sessions. You and I can talk about what we want to do with that. We can look at some executive presence coaching. We can look at rehearsing a little bit more in depth, content, or some other pieces of communication skills that you want to bolster. That's a very popular package. And the mastery program, which I already took you through those 5 modules, that would be kind of your I want professional development, let me add it, kind of a purchase, which is a really powerful tool. It's going to teach you that how-to model that so many of my clients have utilized to get those huge funding numbers. And once you're finished with that program, you're off and running. You can do any pitch, any presentation, knowing that model, having all of these rehearsal pieces really in place. We talk about Q&A. It is the whole enchilada, if you will. So those are a few things to consider today. I also just want to say thank you for all of you who came today. One of my biggest, challenges, of course, as a small business owner is looking for others who would like to hear this kind of message. So if you are part of a group who would like to do or hear something like this, let me know, connect with me, and we can talk about the possibility of going ahead to deliver similar messages or workshops for those folks as well. Okay, that is the end of that. What kind of content excited you today? What are you going to try immediately? And do you have any questions or feedback? Why don't we raise hands and you can tell me right off the bat here? We still have 60 seconds. Thoughts, questions, feedback? Dane.
Well, sure. I knew you were going to be good at this because this is what you teach, but this is the first time I've been to one of your presentations and it was fantastic. I got a lot of good stuff out of it. I think the biggest thing, though, is I tend to approach the perspective of what do I have to say rather than what do these people want to hear? So that shift in mindset is really helpful. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. Juan.
Oh, really inspiring. And you're a lighthouse in the ocean. So I would like to do all the courses, to learn a lot from you.
Thank you, Juan. I appreciate that. Thank you. Hi, Ayami. It's good to see you. I will send you the recording. I think maybe you had the wrong time or I had a miscommunication with you, but thank you for popping in.
No, I saw it too late, but then I think the session was probably still running. So that's why I thought
it's okay.
Better show up late rather than not at all.
Absolutely. Well, no worries. We'll get you the recording. I have one more person coming in a little bit late as well. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. We will. It's okay. We'll definitely share the recorded file with you afterwards. No problem. It'll all be there for you. Any other final thoughts or questions for me? Anything that you can do today? Who has a message coming up and before Thanksgiving? Raise your hand if you have something you are developing that you want to present or pitch before Thanksgiving. Dane, okay. Anybody else have something coming up that's important? Guillermo, what do you have coming up, Guillermo?
I'm building a VC fund, so fundraising is an ongoing activity for speeches and meetings, and very valuable what you just shared with us.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, that's certainly in my zone for sure. So we can chat about that on our 15 minutes. Sure. Well, for the two people who popped in really late, you still get the free 15-minute call with me, which is what everybody on this call gets. And iRobot, I don't have your first name. Brian, there it is. You have your hand raised. Go ahead.
I was just going to echo Guillermo. We're both raising VC funds, so doing the exact same thing, lots of pitches.
Great.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Brian, definitely catch the recording. I wonder if there was a time zone question or just popped on late, but we'll definitely love to do the 15 minutes with you when it will work for us. Steve, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, just a comment for you, Cindy.
Yeah.
I don't remember if in our prior discussions, with all of the Vistage groups that I was involved with and the level of some hundreds of speakers that come to the meetings, but there are only a few people that do a presentation on communication skills. And I don't know if I've given you the names. I mean, I can, if you're interested in that and speaking to groups, I can connect you to some of those people if you want to become on the speaker list.
Yeah, that would be awesome, Steve. I think you did give me at least one person and I spoke with her and I'm trying to remember who that was, but let's chat offline. I would be grateful for any introductions. Thank you.
Okay.
For sure. And Brian, I see a couple of things here. Time zone. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you.